It would be easy to say that Final Fantasy as a whole is about the eternal struggle of good versus evil, and you wouldn't be wrong in thinking that, but every title in the series also features plenty of moments that step away from the overall conflict and focus more on individual issues the party faces. No tale can be told without tension, of course, and making the player focus on specific moments in the narrative is a brilliant way of making every story unique and personal. I'm Mol from EXP Required, and today we're going to be looking at 7 moments across the franchise where the horror ramps up and makes us shiver with fear. Beware of spoilers for the following titles. One expects their return from an ancient shrine, powerful new weapon in hand, to be met with a hero's welcome, but the path back from FF12's Miriam Still Shrine heralds disaster. Whether you walk or teleport back to Mount Bur-Omisace, you'll be coming face to face with the aftermath of the Arcadian Empire's might. A far cry from its lively appearance upon your first visit, the pilgrims and refugees that once filled the approach are now heavily injured or dead. Not knowing what awaits you at the peak, but expecting the worst, fills us with unshakable dread. And who should be the architect of such brute force but one of the Judges Magister? Faceless, fearless, and the upholders of the law, we've known them from moment one as not just the enemy, but as Arcades' most loyal crusaders, and have had the displeasure of facing off against one of them already. Now we face Judge Bergen, with the power of Nethicite coursing through his body, elevating him from a force to be reckoned with to practically demonic. Not even defeating him brings us any satisfaction. The Grand Kiltius remains slain, young Lasses returned home by force, and countless innocents now suffer, leaving Evilus feeling as though nowhere is truly safe. As if this wasn't enough, a closer look at Bergen's body reveals his very bones have been altered by Nethicite, granting him his monstrous power, and the glimpse we have of the ghostly figure over his shoulder indicates there might be more than meets the eye to the Empire's actions. One of the initial additions to the party, FF9's Princess Garnet, renamed Dagger, is one of Final Fantasy's few characters that holds 2 jobs or roles at the same time. Primarily a white mage, she has the ability to summon 5 Eidolons from the very first time you control her in battle, but their prohibitively high MP costs means you won't be able to do so unless you go out of your way to level her up in the early areas of the game. Having decided to escape her home of Alexandria after being horrified by her mother's sudden infatuation for war, Garnet later decides to return in an attempt to reason with her and prevent any more bloodshed. Those hopes are quickly dashed. The princess finds herself at the mercy of evil advisor Kuja and court jesters Zorn and Thorn, who don't have her best interests at heart. Rendered unconscious and then brought deep within the castle to a hidden dungeon, they proceed to rip the Eidolons from her, leaving her weak and helpless. Rescuing Garnet is a race against the clock. The player has 30 minutes to discover where she's being held, all the while being chased by guards around the annoyingly large Alexandria castle. Not finding her in time leads to a game over screen, as Queen Brane has decided that once her summons are taken, her daughter should be executed for having stolen one of the jewels Brane's seeking in her quest for power. Chilling stuff. It's not every day we see filicide used as a threat, and the horror of having something personal ripped away from our heroine is only mitigated by the later lower MP costs when she relearns how to summon her Eidolons. Final Fantasy IV might be a straightforward story, but we're drawn in again and again thanks to the rich characters that bring the world to life. Its curtain rises on a regretful soldier and his doubts that his king's orders are worth carrying out, and our involvement in the story only gets more personal with every new character we meet. While every member of the final party has their reasons for fighting, arguably it's Edge that has the most personal cause to bring the pain to Golbez and his forces. Before we meet him, his home, the kingdom of Eblan, has been decimated by the Archfiend of Fire, who was able to defeat the ninja population without any problem. The survivors escaped to a nearby cave system, and talking to the NPCs here reveals that when Edge was preoccupied, the king and queen were taken away. Not one to sit around and wait for someone else to rescue him, Edge has left the caves to go further into the tunnels, and when we discover him, he's facing off against the Archfiend Rubicante, who promptly wipes the floor with him. Once he's healed, he joins the party without a second thought, helping you get into the fearsome Tower of Babel, your next destination. Deep within, you come across a pair of monsters that take the guise of Edge's parents, and after doing their best to drag you to hell with them, regain their sense of selves and apologise to him before dying. While only minor characters, the fate of these two has stuck with us for years. Parental death is a difficult topic to navigate, and hearing Edge scream in rage in the DS remake felt so natural. And winning the fight against Rubicante felt so good. It takes more than a day-night cycle for things to get dark in Final Fantasy XV. Though Noctis' journey starts off on a light-hearted note, the fall of his kingdom quickly catches up with him. The boys learn about Insomnia's destruction via newspapers and decide to try and return home to see firsthand what's going on, though their path forward is blocked by Imperial soldiers and new orders from Allied corps sees them reluctantly turn their backs on the city. By the time the group makes it to Altissia, there's been no end of problems, from storming Imperial bases, to having their car misappropriated, to having MT troops drop in without warning any time and any place. So it's a relief to catch our breath in the beautiful seaside city. The peace doesn't last. Lunafreya awakens the astral Leviathan for Noctis to forge a covenant with, but it's a risk the city is wary of, and rightfully so when it all goes wrong. Seeing a chance to swoop in, Niflheimer forces attempt to slay the Hydrian and capture the Oracle, only for their onslaught to go horribly wrong, quicker than you can say regalia. Enraged, Leviathan turns her destructive gaze on the incoming ships, and only Titan's summoning is enough to quell her anger, but not before Altissia's razed to the ground. Though Noctis' friends do their best to evacuate the city, there's no doubt that not everyone will have made it out alive, much like Insomnia's fall, showcased spectacularly in the feature film Kingsglaive. And to heap personal tragedy onto an already awful situation, Ignis is left blinded by the encounter, and Lunafreya dead. We can think of no worse outcome than this, and the boys' miserable adventure isn't over yet. The people that live within Final Fantasy XIII's cocoon are just that, people, up to a certain point. Early in the story, the party is magically branded and promptly become enemies of the world, splitting up as they attempt to evade capture. Though the fallacy that turns the party into l'Cie is from the lower world Pulse, Cocoon also has its share of godly beings that aren't quite as benevolent as we're initially led to believe. Pilot Saz tells us that his young son was also turned into a l'Cie by way of unfortunate accident not long before the game begins, and has been taken into protective custody by the government as they attempt to decipher his focus. Of all the horrors seen across the franchise, there's few as raw and real as something terrible happening to a child. And when the outcomes in this situation are turning into either a shambling zombie or eternal crystalhood, it feels as though nothing we can do will help. If this wasn't bad enough, Daj has been surrendered to the callous Jill Nabat, who only seems to care about herself. Her gloating as Saz watches his son transform was only overshadowed by the way she reveals the truth of how his brand was acquired in the first place, which leads to the most harrowing cutscene in the game where Saz wrestles with his despair. What comes to mind when you think of FF6? Is it Ultras, beloved and beloathed mischief maker with as many tentacles as lives? Is it Kefka's absurd fashion sense and iconic laugh? Maybe it's the opera sequence, a spectacle from start to finish. Some of the game's most notable scenes are pretty humorous despite the dark introduction to this world, but we feel they only serve to make the later world of Ruin even more tragic. Initially, clown-faced Kefka serves as a villain we can laugh at, his outlandish manner fitting his sense of style, but he's more threat than he first appears. Our first indication we should take him seriously comes when he poisons Dharma's water supply and decimates the castle from within, a horror all its own. And later he abandons all pretense of working with the Emperor and murders him moments before taking control of the very gods of magic. The party we've gathered is separated under the force of Kefka's new power, and we rejoin the world a year after this moment as Celes, former general in the same forces Kefka once served. She's weak from a year in a coma, but blessedly not alone. Her adoptive grandfather Cid has been taking care of her all this time, though it's exhausted him. As the only two people on this solitary island, all access to the rest of the new ruined world is cut off. But we don't need to see the rest of it to know everything has changed for the worse. The sky is permanently dusky, the ground seemingly burnt and barren, and in battle, enemies frequently die before you can land a single hit on them. As if this existence wasn't terrible enough, Cid passes despite your best efforts, and Celes is left entirely alone, leading to one of the most tear-jerking scenes in the whole franchise as she ponders her future, or lack thereof. Not many things are as awful as war, let alone a war that never ends, even when there's periods of calm. While FF10's Spira is a treat for the eyes, brightly coloured and strongly reminiscent of Southeast Asian topography, its pleasant surface hides a rotten core perpetuating said war. Nowhere is this more apparent than the Mi'ihen High Road, where two factions put aside their differences to face down sin once and for all. Operation Mi'ihen is led by Maester Keenock, head of Yevon's military faction, and volunteer warriors the Crusaders, having temporarily joined hands with the heretic Al-Bhed, whose Machina might is often blamed for the advent of sin. While those taking part in the operation are determined to end the threat to Spira then and there, those in the know the whole thing is a waste of time. The battle ends with wholesale slaughter. If the fiends on the ground weren't overwhelming enough, Sin unleashes an attack equivalent to a nuclear bomb going off. The ground forces are vaporized in an instant, and the high road suffers heavy bombardment. We're drawn into this conflict personally, knowing that our actions decide the fate of two named NPCs, Gata and Luzu, of which one will always die, though who survives depends on our choices. Think it ends there? Final Fantasy X-2 reminds us of this operation again, with the reveal that Payne's Crusader group, the Crimson Squad, were sent to the Den of Woe while it was happening, so that the good Maester could strengthen his military might for personal gain. As if the massacre wasn't enough. Well, we hope you've been feeling the fear with us as we've looked back at these moments. While Final Fantasy isn't afraid to get dark in places, there's little us Warriors of Light can't overcome. Let us know if you enjoyed this list, or if there's other moments you wish we'd looked at. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video around. If you'd like to hear more Final Fantasy discussion, we also have a podcast linked in the description below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time!